Hello everyone and welcome to another lesson. What we're going to do today is we are going to have a look at animal cells and plant cells. So the first thing I think would be great for us to do would be to draw these out. The process of drawing these out is great because drawing things out is kind of relaxing, but also it helps you to remember what the different parts of these cells are, their similarities and their differences. So first of all, let's draw our animal cell. An animal cell is quite easy to draw because an animal cell does not really have very many parts. That did not take very long for us to do, but the process of drawing it out is really good for us to actually understand what it is that we're drawing. So now we're going to label the different parts. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to label the parts of the cell that are the same for both animal cells and plant cells. Okay, so I'm going to put here in the middle similarities. Now, the first thing that both an animal and a plant cell have is this extremely, let's do this in a different colour, is this extremely important part here that we've done as being coloured in. There we go. And that part there is the nucleus. Okay, and the nucleus is incredibly important because it controls the genetic material and the activity of the cell. Okay, then another similarity that we have is this part here. Okay, so this part is the part that's inside the cell. Okay, and this part here is called the cytoplasm. There we go. Cytoplasm. And the cytoplasm is a gel-like substance where most of the chemical reactions will happen. Okay, so again, a very important part of both the animal and the plant cell. The next part that we're going to label is the part that holds both of these cells together, and it also is able to control what goes in and out of the cell, and that part is called the cell membrane. There we go. Oops. Cell membrane. Now, this part here is easy to label on the animal cell, but it's important when you're labeling this on the plant cell that it's the inside part. It's not the outside part. The cell membrane is this inside part here. Okay, and that's what's going to hold the cell together and allow what goes in and out of the cell. Then another incredibly important part for both of these cells is going to be the mitochondria. Okay, and the mitochondria is here. Let's write that down. Mitochondria. Okay, and again, the mitochondria are extremely important because this is where respiration happens. And obviously animal and plant cells both need respiration to produce energy. Okay. And then the last incredibly important part that both of these cells have is called the ribosome. And the ribosomes, what they do is that's where the different amino acids will go and proteins will be produced. And proteins, again, extremely important for the growth and repair of animals and plants. So that's something that needs to happen in both of those cells. Okay, so we've looked at the things that are the same And now let's look at the things that are different for the plant cell compared to the animal cell. Now, one of the first things that we will notice is we have this outside part, and this outside part is called the cell wall, and it's only the plant cell that has the cell wall. Okay, and the cell wall is important because it supports and strengthens the cell, and it's made of cellulose. Now, the next thing that the plant cell has that the animal cell does not have is this large part in the middle. And the large part in the middle here is called the vacuole. Okay, and the vacuole contains the cell sap. Just write that down to start with. So we've got the vacuole that contains, there we go, the cell sap, which provides support for the cell. And the next part that we're going to look at, now this is crucial for plant cells because of the process that plant cells do, is this part here, and this is called the chloroplast. Okay, and the chloroplast, again, extremely important because this is where photosynthesis occurs, which provides the food for the plant. So that's it, the basics of an animal cell and a plant cell. Both of these are eukaryotic cells because the key feature to identify these as eukaryotic cells is that the genetic information is contained within the nucleus. So this part that controls all the genetic information, and where the genetic information is contained, the nucleus, is what makes both of these eukaryotic cells. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at a different type of cell where the genetic information is not contained in the nucleus, and that would be a prokaryotic cell. And one example of a prokaryotic cell is a bacteria cell, which is much, much smaller than these type of cells. Okay, so for the prokaryotic cells, again, we've got our bacteria cell. And with the bacteria cell, it has a cell wall. Prokaryotic cell also has single strand of genetic material there in the middle, but it's not contained within a nucleus, it's floating around. Okay, we also get these circular DNA, which are called plasmids. So that's just circular DNA that the bacteria cell also has. Okay, and we have the cytoplasm. And we have the cell membrane. Now, the bacteria cell is much, much, much smaller than the animal and plant cell. Bacteria do not contain chloroplast like you would expect with a plant cell, although it does have a cell wall, and it also does not have mitochondria. So it's not wholly like a plant cell. However, it's not wholly like an animal cell either, because although it's got a cell membrane, it's got cytoplasm, and it's got genetic information, the genetic information is not in a nucleus, but it also has a cell wall, which an animal cell wouldn't. So it can't be classified as an animal cell, and it can't be classified as a plant cell. Okay, so now that we've looked at cells and their different organelles, their different parts that have different functions, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at how cells are able to differentiate, and differentiate means how they're able to change their subcellular structures so that they can do their specific jobs. So the first cell that we're going to look at is this one here, and this here is the sperm cell. Now, when we look at how this cell here is different to the normal cell, animal cell that we drew, we can see that this cell, first of all, has a long tail. And what this long tail does is it helps the sperm cell to swim and meet up with the egg cell. Also, a sperm cell has lots and lots and lots of mitochondria, and the mitochondria will provide energy that's needed for this cell to move and then to get into the egg cell so it can fertilize the egg cell. Okay, so in terms of specialization, we said the first thing was the tail, which enables it to swim. And we also said that the sperm cell has lots of mitochondria, and remember the mitochondria is where respiration happens, which then provides energy. Okay, now the second cell that we're going to look at is this cell here. This cell here is the nerve cell, and the nerve cell is needed for rapid signaling. So basically the nerve cell is, first of all, is a long cell, and the reason it's a long cell is because it can carry electrical signals, because that's its function, a long distance. Now, if we look at the nerve cell here, we can see that the nerve cells have branched connections so that the cell is able to connect to other nerve cells to provide a network in the body. Okay, so we also have branched connections to connect the ends along the network in the body. Okay, now the next cell that we're going to look at is muscle cells. Now, muscle cells are specialized for contractions. Okay, so muscles contracting is how they work. So let's just put that here. Okay, now the muscle cells are quite long, so they have space to contract. So along with this, we have to say that the cells are long to enable contractions. Okay, and if we look again, the muscle cells have lots of mitochondria to provide lots of energy. There we go, lots of energy. Lovely. Now the next cell that we're going to look at is the root hair cell. Okay, so these are the cells that are in the roots of plants, and the reason the root hair cell is shaped very differently is because the function of the root hair cell is that it needs to absorb water and minerals. Okay, so the root hair cell has this extended surface area, so long surface area to absorb water and minerals from the soil. Okay, so rather than this cell just coming down here like a normal plant cell, we've got this extended surface area here, so a lot more water can be absorbed. And then lastly, we have the xylem and the phloem, and both of these are for transporting substances around the plant. And the difference between these two is that where we have the phloem, okay, the phloem will transport the glucose, the food that's made in the plant. So photosynthesis happens in the leaves, and then we get the food, the glucose that's made in the leaves, and then the glucose, the food for the plant, has to be transported all around the plant. Okay, so the phloem transports the food, which is the glucose produced in photosynthesis, around the plant. Okay, so the glucose has to go in lots of different directions, and the phloem enables that to happen. Now, if we look at the xylem here, the xylem is used to transport the water and minerals from the soil. Now, if you think about it, the water and the minerals is going to come up from the root, so we want this just to go in one direction, to be going up the plant to all the places where it's needed. Okay, and these cells are called specialised cells because their structures have been changed, so the differentiated cells, because their structures have been changed to enable them to carry out the job that they need to do. So now we're going to have a go at an exam type question, and what we can see here is, first of all, we've got a diagram of a bacteria cell, and we have to label the different parts, and we've got some words to help us. So part A is the part that holds the cell together, and that is the cell wall. Then the second part here is where the chemical reactions happen, and that is the cytoplasm. And then the third part is this circular DNA, which is called the plasmid. Then for our second question, so that's 3 answers, 3 marks. Okay, always look at how many marks you've got to know how many answers you have to put down. Now, one difference between the structure of a bacteria cell and an animal cell would be that in a bacteria cell there is no nucleus. Okay, that's one of the key differences, so I would always put that down if it's a 1 mark answer. You can see here in the bacteria cell, the genetic information is just floating in the middle. It's not held within the nucleus like an animal cell. The second thing that you could put down is that there is no mitochondria. And lastly, what we could say, if we wanted to, is we could also say that the bacteria cell has a cell wall, which an animal cell would not have. Okay, now the next question, again, just 1 answer needed. It says name 1 structure that is found in a plant cell but not in a bacteria cell. So the first thing that we can say is that in a plant cell you would have chloroplast, because that's important. We need that to make the sugars that the food that the plants need to grow. Okay, and the second thing that we can say is that in a plant cell you have a vacuole, but we don't have one in a bacteria cell or an animal cell.